Steve Seelan of South Hill Cider, and today we're making a video for Cider Week to show how we scout out wild apples and pears, and we even had a little harvest session here because when we found this pear tree it was ripe, and pears, there's a very small window when they're ripe.
I'm Leif. I'm Steve's cousin and assistant cider maker at South Hill, and I've been working with them for 3 years now and do a lot of the harvesting and work in the cellar, and yeah, harvesting pears today.
So we are driving down a dirt road in the Finger Lakes National Forest, where right now it looks like forest on either side. Pretty unsurprising. But a lot of the land here is grazed. It's pasture land that is leased by farmers to graze their cows. And those pastures are where we find a lot of our wild apples that go into the pack basket cider. It's a great symbiotic relationship that the cows and the wild apple trees have. The wild apple trees up here probably would not be as plentiful if it had not been for cows that would spread their seeds around by eating apples, and then the seeds would sprout on the far side of a barbed wire fence and they would grow into trees. But by the cows grazing the land, they keep the shrubs and other weeds from taking over the wild apples and outcompeting the trees. Here we have Natalie, Edith, Lulu, and Emily. Natalie's going to be the camera person for the moment, and I'm going to demonstrate. May as well talk to you here. I'm going to demonstrate how to get over a barbed wire fence without hurting yourself. I used to try and do this or this. It works. But then if you find a stout stake and you put your feet right on the fence, right near the stake, it's a much more controlled way to get over the fence. This is the spot where I think this was a cellar from maybe a barn, maybe a house. It doesn't look like much, but it's quite a hole in the ground.
Yes, it is.
And right up there, I'll show you, there's an old silo foundation. It's totally round. I'm guessing it was a silo because it was so round. And so this pear tree, I've always wondered if it was planted by somebody or if it's a wild pear because it's so close to the homestead site. But I've never found a graft mark at the base of the tree. So if you look at the base of the tree, yeah, I don't see any graft marks. And the pears also, they're not very sweet. They're very tannic. So maybe they were planted for Perry, but I don't know about that. Now we're walking along a hedgerow that used to have a fence along it, probably because all these trees are in a line. There's no fence now, but right along in this hedgerow you can see these apple trees. Some are healthier than others. This one's still pretty healthy, and this one has a good crop on it.
Whoa, it has so many yellow apples. Right here. So many.
So we are still on the way back from the National Forest. The sun is nearing setting, so it is the golden hour. It's very beautiful out there. And we're coming up to another set of trees which I've never been able to figure out if they're wild or if they were planted. And one of them is bittersweet and the other one is a red flesh apple. And they're right next to each other, and yeah, we've harvested them for many years, since at least 2012 I can remember harvesting them. And because it's a year that there were very few apples on a lot of the trees around here, but for some reason these ones had a crop. And we'll pull over here and then we'll go check them out. They're in a hedgerow. Yeah, again, not sure if they're wild or if they're planted, but I don't know how to turn my lens around. I guess we'll just do it selfie style. Here we go. Got off the road. Got a hazards on in my scouting Honda, and here we go. I'll show you the tree. So here's the setting. We are at the edge of a hayfield. Some years it's been corn, and it just looks like a weedy hedgerow, right? But if you look up in the top there, there are these really nice, they're kind of glossy, they're quite disease resistant, and so it's one of the varieties that I've grafted onto existing trees to keep it and propagate it for our own orchard. All right, so now we're back the second day. Yesterday we scoped out the wild apples and pears here, and fortunately we found a pear tree that had a lot of fruit on it. Hopefully it's still here today, because if it fell overnight, the cows probably ate it all, and that's happened to me with these pears before. It's yeah. So here I'm going to show the truck. We just loaded it up this morning for our foraging expedition, and we've got the crates that we're going to put the apples and pears in. We have what are called panking poles, which is a fun word to say. Panking is the activity of shaking fruit out of the trees. We've got these old wooden poles. We also have these telescoping fiberglass poles, which were a really nice hand-me-down. My father used to be a lineman working on electric lines, and these were discarded because they started getting a little old. And these have nice hooks on the end. We also use them in the winter for pruning. They make really nice pruning saws because you can get two hands on it and you don't get as tired as just pulling it with one hand. And then we have a ladder. Some of the trees are short enough that we will pick the fruit from a ladder right into our harvest buckets, which we'll put on. So sometimes it goes on the we shake it on the ground, sometimes we pick right from the tree. And then we have this nice dolly that we can use to carry the fruit out of the pasture if it's 1,000 or 2,000 feet from the road. Now we're gonna get over the fence and get all the equipment into the pasture. Get my mask on so we can do this socially distanced. So we just jumped over this barbed wire fence, which years ago when I was first foraging up here, I was nervous that I was breaking the law. And because when you're jumping a fence, you just sort of feel like you're breaking the law. But over the years, I've come to realize this fence is here to keep the cows in, not to keep the humans out. And also, I had an interesting experience last winter. I got a letter from the National Forest, from someone in the National Forest, and I got nervous because it started to read, "It has come to our attention that you have been harvesting fruit in the National Forest," and I was afraid I was going to get in trouble. And in actuality, they just wanted to let me know that technically I needed a permit in order to harvest this fruit. And so I went through the process and I got a permit, and so now I can legally harvest fruit here and offer it for sale. It it was actually not too bad. It was $24 to harvest 800 pounds. So the labor is most of the work anyway, so I wasn't worried about that cost. So yeah.
Want the other one?
Yeah. Cleaning up the space under the tarp is pretty helpful. And I found this location about 5 years ago, and I've been coming here every year. Usually about every other year we have a good crop. There's some apples this year, but this pear tree has a really good crop, which is always very unpredictable. And just this year, I noticed this apple tree had kind of fallen over, and someone has come in here and cut some of the crown out of the apple tree. I'm not quite sure if it was to harvest this tree or just to allow access. There's a cow trail on the other side of the canopy. So yeah, has me wondering why someone was cutting on these trees. The lower part of the tree is bare, so maybe there is someone that comes in here and harvests up to 15 or 20 feet. But everything up above that is still pretty loaded. So I'm really not sure if anyone harvested down low or not. All right, so a quick lesson in shaking when you're shaking up 20 or 30 feet. It's a lot easier to maneuver the pole when it's standing straight up and down because it's easier to keep it balanced, like moving a ladder. And so you get it roughly where you want it, and then you get the hook up in the canopy, and you kind of have to throw it up there at the last second once it starts to tip. There you go, just grab the branch like that. And then ideally you have a pole that's long enough so you don't have to stand directly under the tree. You want to stand just outside the tree for obvious reasons. And then you can look for some of the smaller branches. Going through, get a little wet. Alright. And it's good to have scouts out there. Leaf, do you see a branch that I can grab from here?
If you can get one higher, we could add another section. But
Like this?
oh, also actually down and right to the right below the one you were just doing. To the right a little bit.
Oh, this one over here?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm trying to catch the branch just at the right point. When you're grabbing a branch with a hook, there's an optimum zone to grab it. If you grab way out towards the tip, it's too floppy, it won't really do much. And if you grab it too close to the tree, it's just way too stout and you can't get it to move much. So there's a spot right in the middle where when you grab it, what you're trying to do is make the end of the branch, like if you grab it here, make the end of the branch move. So you sort of get this rhythm which makes it snap, almost like a whip. That's the ideal. Got it. So there's a bunch of different size poles, and shorter poles you can kind of use with one hand. When they get longer, you need two hands. When they get this long, you kind of need your whole body to get enough weight into it, because you're trying to sort of get the branch going, and then when it's going back up, you want to snap it back down so it makes like a whip. And this one seems to work best when I'm really going. I'll start to hop. You might want to even watch my feet. So we just got back in. We're about, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 feet from the road. And I scoped this tree out yesterday. There were no cows here yesterday. And I knew this tree had a bunch of fruit on it. So we came up here today, and here are a bunch of cute cows, which kind of shows why this area is so unique for harvesting wild apples. That there used to be a bunch of farms up here, and then the National Forest acquired the property many decades ago, and people lease the land now to graze cattle up here. And the cattle, it's a symbiotic relationship with the cows and the trees. The reason the trees are here in the first place, I think, is because there was a fence line here, and then the cows would eat apples from the orchards that were up here, and they would spread the seeds around. Then the seeds would sprout along the fence lines and grow up into trees. And if they were just on the other side of the fence, the cows couldn't eat the seedlings, and they would grow up into a wild tree. And now the cows continue to graze here, so they keep the weeds down. If you look around, it's on open pasture. And so there aren't a lot of shrubs under the wild trees. There aren't a lot of vines or weeds to have to clear or climb through. Harvesting wild apples can sometimes be very logistically difficult if there's shrubs under the trees. And so you can see how wide open these trees are for picking. So it's almost like it's been manicured. In fact, there's less weeds here than there is in my orchard. So we're gonna put up a ladder and harvest these trees by hand into our buckets, just like as if it's an orchard, even though they're totally wild trees. And we have to be careful if you fill crates and leave them uncovered while you're picking the tree. Cows are wise to it, that they can just come up and eat right out of your buckets. So for sanitary reasons, we are not going to pick right off the ground here, and we are going to cover the crates so the cows won't eat our fruit out of the boxes. I think they were taking a nap under the tree, just waiting for a windstorm to come along and knock the snack down for them. So it looks like we're gonna have to fight it out for the apples today. These apples, the variety doesn't have a name because every wild seedling is a unique variety. Whenever one apple tree pollinates another, their offspring are related to each parent, but they are not the same thing. So you can't propagate a variety by seed. You have to graft it to make it replicate itself. And so all of these wild trees are unique varieties. They're unnamed. Once we graft them, put them in an orchard, once they start fruiting, then they probably will have a name. obviously when there are this many cows that have come to see what we're doing, we don't harvest off the ground. So I'm gonna leave harvested whatever you could off the ladder. I got whatever I could down below. And now I'm gonna see if I can get up in there. It's easiest to climb the tree and then have someone hand you a basket to pick into. Might have to climb the ladder to hand me the basket.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready anytime.
Here.
Got it. As long as these branches are alive, I feel pretty safe standing on them. If there's dead branches, I avoid those unless they're very big and relatively sound. But like if you look at all these apples that are up here, there's at least 100 or so pounds of apples. So as I relieve the apple tree of its weight, hopefully I can go out farther on the branch. I'm gonna try and break a branch out. Don't be afraid. There we go. So we just finished picking the wild pear and wild apples. The cows are still following us around, hoping we're going to drop more apples. I wanted to point out this rock formation here was my first indication that this was probably a homestead site. And for these wild apples, I attribute them for the most part to whatever humans planted the orchards here to begin with. We know in our records there were settlers here of European descent that had homesteads up here. They had orchards. They were subsistence farming for a long time. But I wanted to acknowledge that before that, the Seneca and Cayuga people lived here for centuries, and they were displaced by who we consider the settlers. So I just want to acknowledge that. And the history here goes back many centuries with orchards. I'm not sure exactly where the apples that set the seed for all these wild apples originally came from. Maybe we'll figure that out someday. But no doubt it was by people who lived up here doing subsistence farming for generations, and I wanted to acknowledge that.
Cider Week Finger Lakes is brought to you by the New York Cider Association and is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors.